Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Elevative Shots of 2025. I hope you had a fantastic break and you're ready for what's coming this year. What I'm bringing for this episode is a lot of conversations around public policy, leadership, change, but I'm not going to give you all the information. I'm going to get you to dive into the conversation with Dr. Erin Watson, joining us from Melbourne today. Erin is the managing director of Baker and York and a specialist in international public policy with a focus on APAC regions like India and Southeast Asia. Erin's expertise has supported corporations, governments, and startups in navigating major policy reforms. She's also the founder and the chair of Australia Latam Emerging Leaders Dialogue, which is the connection we have each other, and a director on the Council on Australia and Latin America Relations. Erin has dedicated her career to fostering relationships across cultures and industries. It is my pleasure to have you with me today. Erin, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for having me, Mariana.
Well, the way we do this is a shot. So we are giving you, the audience, three interesting insights around the topics that we're going to cover today. And you ready, Erin, for
Yep,
those
let's
questions
do
and
it.
answers?
Let's do
Let's
it.
do
Let's
it.
do it.
All right, Erin, you have worked with both private and public organizations. You have experience navigating complex policy and regulatory landscapes. What role does leadership play in ensuring organizations are proactive rather than reactive when it comes to policy and regulatory implications and still being innovative and adaptable?
Really good question, Mariana. And I think that it sort of takes a little bit of context setting to answer that question. Um, the political and regulatory environment matters more than ever before. There's increasing regulations and legal issues. There's a range of commercial opportunities that come out of the regulatory environment as well. And so, based on that, looking at the regulatory environment, looking at what's happening politically, looking at what's happening from a policy posture perspective is so important. It's critical for organizations, whether you are a small startup or whether you are, an ASX top 10 company. This covers the entire spectrum and like I say, more than ever before. And so leaders in organizations, they've got to be on top of the issues. They've got to be part of the conversation. They've got to be a part of the debate. They have to be able to show thought leadership as well. But that's only one thing. Having influence and helping to shape policy, being able to respond innovatively or come up with new innovative solutions, it actually requires you to really sit back and go beyond your own backyard. A lot of the challenges that we're facing are no longer just isolated to Australia. They might be a very local issue. I always say that politics is always local. That's got to be understood. But other places around the world, whether you're in the same boat or similar boats, we need to be able to look beyond our own doorstep and look at what others are doing, look at where things have worked, where they haven't worked, look at evidence bases, and then be able to think creatively about how we might apply those here in Australia or what that might mean for your organisation as well.
Amazing. I think a couple of words that you mentioned that are relevant to, and the roles of leader is the influence, and do we have the tools and the strategies to
Mm.
influence within the organization and outside the organization, and also creativity. And the next questions is around that from your experience that you have observed and worked globally across industries, and you have observed different leadership styles. And what fascinates and what I'm looking for with this question is that you have seen different leadership styles in different cultures, right? So, what are the key similarities and contrasts that you have noticed, especially in the comparison between Australia and the rest of the world? And what practices do you think Australian leaders could adopt to be more creative, to drive that impactful change that we need here in Australia?
Mm. Yeah, really, really great questions. And I think that I've observed so many different leadership styles, many, many different styles here in Australia, but also very different approaches in different countries as well. And I think that some of the toughest leaders I've seen and effective leaders that I've seen have come from places like Singapore. They know they might be expatriate there, but they're working and living in that system, which is often very American, actually, a very American way of working. And in India as well, really strong leaders, and the US. Now, they're very different economic and political and social environments.
Hmm.
And I think one thing about the Americans, they tend to be very transactional, right? So if they enter into business with you, they're going to do business with you. And I think that that's very different to Australia, which is much more relationship driven. And so you can have many conversations with one person and then it doesn't really go anywhere. And then, maybe it does down the track, but a lot more relationship focused. But I think the key thing, regardless of where these people are and what kind of environment they're in, they're really decisive. They're able to make tough decisions. And unlike, I remember when I first stepped into senior leadership roles in big universities, actually, I was like, oh, I need to be friends with people and I need to be likable. And I think good leaders are likable and people want to work with you if they think you're a nice person. Now, I think being nice is good, but being really decisive is actually is the most important thing, I think, for your team. The challenge with that is that doesn't mean you're always liked. And I think that I've been harsh in my judgment of other leaders where I've gone, not very nice though. And then I look back and I go, but they're really, really good at their job. They're really good at bringing the team along with them. And it's because they're able to be trusted. The other thing that I see in really good leaders everywhere is their ambition. And I think that, I don't want to overdo it here about tall poppy in Australia, but these people aren't here. They are elsewhere. And it's because they're really ambitious, not only for their own careers, but what they think they can do in those roles and what they can achieve in those roles. So they can really do something, really turn the dial. One leader I really admire, Samir Saran from Observer Research Foundation in India. He has such a high ambition for what he does. And he said to me before, Erin, it doesn't have to be the biggest and the best. You just have to put one foot in front of the other and start small. And I've seen him grow a conference platform globally using that model. And it's really powerful. He's also very decisive in the decisions that he makes. So you can bring a bunch of problems, and I've seen him do it. Yes, no, yes, no. So they're the kinds of qualities that I think are really really common where you see people who've been very successful and very good in their roles as leaders.
And I don't think we have this on the scripts, but what's your leadership style? Given that you have painted a picture internationally, locally, what's your leadership style?
Maybe ask my team what they think my leadership style is. Oh dear. They probably have very different feedback. Maybe I need to do some feedback with them. Look, I think my leadership style has changed really significantly. And I think that, I don't think I was 32 when I ended up on a chair of the board. I had a former premier as board members. I was working with really senior people and I had zero experience. I had a lot of chutzpah. I had that, but I didn't have very much experience. And I also stepped into a director's level role at the University of Melbourne at AsiaLink. So I had these two big roles and I had these teams and I was quite young and quite inexperienced. And I remember Googling leadership styles. Like, how am I going to run? How am I going to run this? What is my style going to be? And I remember thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to have a democratic leadership style. Like I want to make sure, which was not me backing myself, actually. It was going, oh, I want to make it feel like these were your decisions and I want to take you along for the ride and I want to make sure everybody feels heard. Now, those things are really, really important as leaders, and you want to make sure your team feels consulted and so on. I think that's a way to bring people, if you take, if you think about policy in an internal perspective, you can kind of take them along for the ride, particularly through periods of change. But I don't necessarily think that that's my style anymore, because it can be, it uses a lot of time. It doesn't necessarily get the outcomes that your team wants. Your team wants you to tell them often what it is that they need to do, what is the outcome, and how can they get there in the fastest, most efficient, most rigorous way.
Yep.
Because the workforce has moved from input to output. And the teams that I hire now, I don't want them sitting chained at their desk because their job is 9 till 5. I want to give them a task and I want them to do the job, and I want them to go home to their family, or I want them to go traveling with their friends, or I want them to go and spend time with their wife. Like I don't want to spend hours on a call saying, how does this make you feel? I want to say, these are the jobs we've got to get done. Go and do them in the fastest, efficient way that you can and come to me with any questions. And I hope that that fosters a more inclusive environment of people's lifestyles and whatever. Like it's actually a way of working in this sort of, it's which is entirely the opposite to what we're now seeing in the US happen, which is, government workers being brought back to the office. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying, here is your job. Get it done. However, just get it done on time. It's like, the old on time and in budget. Get it done on time to the quality it needs to be. Send me a message if there's any issues, and then let's move on with our lives. And that's how I tend to work now.
Yeah.
And again, that requires that you've got a team who trusts you, that you're able to be decisive about what it is that we need to do and when decisions are made, and then be able to move on. And I don't want to do that so I don't know what style that is, right? I just think it's a different way of working to how I used to try and work, given that was almost 10 years ago as well, and times have changed quite significantly. But I definitely, it's evolved, and I think good leaders evolve. They as a leader, you should.
Yeah. And look, I think it's a tricky question because, as you said, I don't think there's a specific style that's for everyone. I mean, I don't want to, put a label on this is your leadership style. I think it's your own thing, as you just described, with different traits. And also it adjusts depending on the situations. As you mentioned, sometimes you just have to be tough on decision making and not necessarily being liked. But in other occasions, yeah, you play that card depending on, crisis management, for example.
Absolutely.
It really, the needs, yeah.
Everyone wants to work with someone that you can have a dinner with,
Absolutely.
But it's not your core business. And I think that I actually think you get more respect if you're able to say to someone, this actually isn't very good. Try it this way in a nice way.
Yeah, constructive. Yes.
Firm way and constructive way, and say, perhaps try this, or say, this isn't good enough. Or, this is the decision we're going to make, even though there's 4 other options, but I think this is the right choice. And this is the way we're going to take this report or this project, and that's it. And if your team have worked with you long enough and understand that there is a method to your decisions, they respect that, I think. But like I said, perhaps go and send a poll to my team and see what they say.
And look, it's also, the way you communicate with them, assertive communication. Are you clear with them? Do they know that system that's going on in your head or the way you like? It's how we talk to our team members or people we work with and understand their needs, and we understand our needs, and that's how you create that trust. I loved something you mentioned around not procrastinating or not waiting for the perfection. I remember a phrase from a book I read, Starting the Business, and it's start now, not how. How great is that mantra that and is progress over perfection, right? Let's make the decision and then we work on it on the journey. So,
Mariana, the longer you're in business, I think, particularly if you work for yourself, like this is probably more relevant to any entrepreneurs or
yeah,
small business owners rather than bigger corporations, which ha you might have smaller, more entrepreneurial units within them. I've worked with some really great small dynamic public policy teams in big listed American companies. But when it comes to smaller business, just get it out. No one cares. Just get it done, get it out there. And you will iterate on that so many times
exactly.
anyway that it's just get it out.
Yeah.
There's nothing, no use sitting in your brain. Get it
Yeah.
out there.
It will evolve as the
Yeah.
leadership style, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, we got I think a couple of minutes for the last question, but I don't want to miss it. I think it's super interesting, especially, talking about politics and the United States and, the world. So, in your view, what are the similarities that are between public policy and organizational policy and taking
Mm.
people along for the ride when you need them to buying to what they are trying to do?
Mm. It's we've sort of touched on it before, and I think that
Yep.
it's an interesting question because being that leader is often not your core business. Like if you're a CEO or a senior manager who is dealing with big public policy problems for your business, that's often not what you actually do. You might be a banker, you might be a lawyer, you might be, you might have some kind of tech gaming platform. Like that's not your business. Understanding how to get the right people around you to help make those decisions really, really important and be able to be able to have influence. Kind of similarly within organizations, managing people is often not your core business and what it is that you actually do. So finding ways to bring people along with you on that journey, have buy-in. So I'm going to give you an example.
Hmm.
In my work, I tend to 9 times out of 10 have a consultation process when it comes to a strategy or when it comes to a big piece of policy work or a big report, particularly as a Australian woman who's often working on different regions. So I always have a consultative process. I'm always talking to the stakeholders, always talking to the people who are the beneficiaries, always talking to the decision makers. That then informs and you can test your ideas that way. It's kind of similar with being a manager or a leader inside an organization who's taking people on a journey of change. Talking to those people, talking to your constituents, consulting with them, testing your ideas with them. It's such a great way to get people on that journey with you. They might not like where you end up, but they'll come with you. You've not surprised them. And it's not seen as a top-down approach. It's not also seen as bottom up. It's more, this is us together. Same with working on a strategy with another country that we're working on together. It's a partnership in that sense. If you approach change that way, I think it works better than when I've seen really top down. And this is kind of paradoxical to the decisions that I said you need to be able to make, but that is a really important part, and it's making sure people feel heard. So they might not like the decisions you make at the end, but they'll feel heard and they'll be more bought into the process.
And I think that's the key. It's not necessarily you making decisions. You're making decisions because you heard them as well,
Yeah.
somehow because they were part of the process. And I think that's fundamental in change management. And because at the end of the day, there's a lot of systems that we're implementing. Are we considering what our people are thinking, ideas, innovation, creativity you mentioned at the beginning? And sometimes no, sometimes this is the way and that's it.
And you know what? Sometimes all you have to say is, what do you think?
Exactly. Yes. And
And that
encourage,
people go, oh, hang on. Yeah,
yes,
that's
encourage
terrible,
people to
Erin. Don't do
think.
that. Yeah.
And because, every time I work, in a range of different peoples and different levels in government. And yes, it's always like, I don't know if I can speak up. I don't know if I can raise the hand and, say my
Yeah.
idea. So I think that's, it must come from you as a leader. What do you think? It
Yeah.
might change the Look, I mean, I think we can talk forever. And I knew I told Erin before we started that it will probably go pretty quick.
Yeah.
Was that right, Erin? Yeah?
Yeah, spot on. Yep. You know what you're
Yes.
doing.
So, as always, I really enjoyed this conversation. Erin, do you have anything you would like to add before we say goodbye?
I have so many things I could add. I was just thinking then, Mariana, it's like being on a boat, and you know that I do a lot of sailing, right?
Lots.
There's a lot of people, there's a lot of interpretations, there's lots of different ways of doing things. The skipper has to get all of that information and make a decision, and then the crew has to listen. And you know what? It could be the spare crew person who's got a really good interpretation about the weather. You listen to it and you might go, yeah, actually, that's the way we're going to go. But the skipper makes the decisions. Take that information, take what they're seeing, take what they're hearing, and then be able to chart that course and then win the race, hopefully.
Good. I love ending with a good analogy about also sailing and the ocean and all of that. I'm really envious that every time I look at Erin's stories, sailing and enjoying the weather. Pretty,
You'll have to
is
come
that
on the boat sometimes, Mariana.
I have to come to
Yeah,
Melbourne
yeah.
to do it. But anyway, well, thank you, Erin, for being here and sharing all of your insights around this interesting topic. And if you want to add your comments, suggestions, feedback, please do. The way of learning, as Erin mentioned, and evolving is to, getting feedback, understanding what's good, what's not good. We're open to conversation. So please leave your comments below and follow Erin for more on LinkedIn because she's always sharing her journey across the world. Very inspiring. And well, I hope to see you the next time in the next Elevative Shot episode. I wish you the best. Thank you, Erin, again. And goodbye, all.
Mariana.
Ciao.
Ciao.